Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, and was raised by his loving family, consisting of his mother Beverly Guy and his stepfather Terry Guy. From an early age, Scott showed interest in cars and motorbikes that was greatly supported by his parents, who wanted him to improve his riding skills. They even got him a racer's license when he turned legal. Young Scott started taking racing as a lifestyle, even participating at the Daytona Motor Speedway in Florida. His sharp skills and excellent racing earned him numerous admirers and turned him into a local hero in the town of Chesney. Scott was also very social and preferred to hang out with large groups. People also loved Scott's company. Scott started the idea of the superbike motorsports first in his grandmother's backyard in the late 1990s, where he would repair bikes. Slowly, he started to upgrade his shop to a one-garage building in 2001. He even decided to take in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as his co-partner in the business. And the two young men started to expand their business further. They signed up with Suzuki for a dealership, and their business grew unexpectedly in a short period of time. Brian, who used to work part-time at the starting of the business, decided to leave his job to become a full-time manager of the store. With their hard work and knowledge, the pair started attracting a lot of customers, and the business started to bloom. Even though they were salesmen, they took utmost care when it came to their customers' knowledge about bikes or racing in general. Scott's mother, who first visited the store occasionally, now started to pay regular visits. Soon, she took up the job of taking care of the accounting, payroll, cash drops, and other such work. With the trio, the business boomed, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott decided to attend an industry convention in Chicago. It was during this trip that Scott met his wife, Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They immediately clicked and started to enjoy each other's company, thus meeting up with each other often. As their relationship grew stronger, they decided to get married. Their love life, both before and after their marriage, was that of a fairy tale where the love grew stronger every passing day. To complete their family, Scott and Melissa decided to have a baby, but unfortunately for them, none of their attempts were bearing any fruit. Frustrated, the couple sought medical attention and advice, and finally, after months of struggles, Melissa was pregnant with a little baby boy in October of 2003. With millions of sales in the very first year of business, Scott knew he had to expand his store even more. In order to do this, he required more hands on deck and decided to hire a new mechanic, Chris Sherbert. Chris was quite well known around town for his skilled use of the wrench that attracted Scott towards him. The four of them, Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris, became a sort of a dream team, and their business started to gain attention even outside the small town of Chesney. Everything was going perfectly for the young and talented Scott Ponder until the arrival of his doomsday. Living such a perfect life, Scott never imagined his happiness to be cut short. But this was what happened on November 6, 2003. It was a normal day with not a cloud in the sky and the sun was beaming, but it was not the case at the Superbike Motorsports. Scott and the others started their day at the shop like any other. There were a few customers browsing items in the store. One of them was Kelly Sisk, who had his 4-year-old son with him. He was going to buy a go-kart for his family, and after paying for it, he hung around in the shop for a little while longer. Brian actually had the day off because he was planning to go on a holiday with his family, but he was called in by Scott because there was a customer who said that the bike was not tended to as they promised. Brian came to the shop and immediately started to work on the customer's bike. Scott was tending to another customer when Beverly came by after taking Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemo. She used to take deposits for her son to the bank, and that day she was intending to do the same. When she dropped by, she started to help Scott a little at the counter, since she was planning to go to the bank much later. At around 2:30 p.m., Scott's friend Noah Lee called the shop. Beverly answered the phone, and he asked if he could stop by the shop and it would only take him 7 minutes to reach the shop, to which Beverly agreed. The conversation was short, and after putting the phone back down, Beverly decided to use the bathroom. In the span of 7 minutes, all 4 people in the shop, Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, were savagely shot to death on the Superbike Motorsports premises. At 3 p.m., when Scott's friend, Noel, came by, He saw Scott and Brian lying at the front of the shop as still as statues. At first, he felt they were playing a trick on him. He even likely kicked both of them, telling them to stop messing with him until he saw the pool of blood underneath their bodies and immediately dialed 911. Police and paramedics immediately rushed to the scene. After all, it was the first ever quadruple murder in such a small town like Chesney. The news of the homicide spread like wildfire, and not only the victims' families, but a dozen other people gathered at the crime scene in order to catch a glimpse. The police wasted no time and immediately started the investigation. They found the mechanic, Chris' body at the back of the shop. It was bent over as if he was working on a bike right before he was robbed of his life. Next, they found Beverly's body inside the shop, right in front of the bathroom. The police believe she was ambushed right when she came out of the bathroom. The police found Brian and Scott's bodies, both lying at the front of the store. Brian's body was closer to the door, near the sidewalk, while Scott's body was closer to one of the parked cars in the parking lot. This, the police inferred, was maybe because both Scott and Brian were trying to run for their lives. They went inside, probably on hearing the gunshots, and came face to face with the shooter. And on seeing the dead bodies of Chris and Beverly, they immediately ran out the door, but their attempt to escape failed miserably. The police and forensic teams searched the crime scene thoroughly and gathered blood samples and other evidence from the crime scene. This was an execution-style homicide, where the shooter entered the shop with the motive to murder the people present there and shot them in the chest and head point blank. Scott's wife, Melissa, got a call about the shooting and immediately rushed to the scene. Detectives conducted a thorough investigation, and it didn't take them long to arrive at their first clue. From the statements made by a few passers-by in the area at the time of the murder, they declared to have spotted a couple loitering near the shop. Sketches of the suspects were drawn during the questioning of these eyewitnesses, and the detectives immediately circulated the pictures all over South Carolina. The detectives speculated that the man was the one who shot the victims, Chris and Beverly, at the back, while the woman was distracting the two men, Scott and Brian, up front. When the man came to the front where the two men were, he shot them. This was just mere speculation by the detectives, and none of the facts in this theory were proven. Months passed and police couldn't find any clue regarding the case. Extensive media coverage of the case started putting pressure on the detectives as they started to revisit the crime from a different perspective, and sure enough, a breakthrough appeared. Detectives started to do a thorough study of the victims' past and current lifestyles, and though Scott, Beverly, and Brian's backgrounds came out to be clean, it was not the same for the mechanic, Chris Sherbert. When detectives checked Chris' previous job, the news of a drug connection came into the picture. The detectives found out that Chris might have been involved with the wrong company and was also responsible for smuggling drugs. Moreover, Chris was scheduled to go to court the following Monday before the murder took place. It was 2003 when drug smuggling and abuse was increasing every single day, and the Glyphs were hoping to arrest the key criminal players to eradicate the root cause of drug abuse, especially among young teens. The detectives and the public now started to wonder if this quadruple homicide took place with the motive to murder only Chris and the other three victims were just collateral damage. They even started to speculate that maybe the people involved in this drug business felt that Chris would give evidence against them in court on Monday and decided to end his life. The detective said that this could be a possibility since Chris was the one who was shot first. However, regarding this path of speculation, no evidence was found by the police. Therefore, the investigation stalled again. Finally, after a whole year, the detectives approached the case from a completely different angle once again. The detectives found that Brian, Scott's friend and coworker, was looking for a house weeks before the murder, but strangely enough, his wife Robin had no idea regarding this decision taken by him. Later, Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, spoke of the unhappy and strained marriage between the pair and how Brian was planning to move out to live alone. Though this didn't seem to have a connection to the shooting, a discovery made by the detectives a few days later brought out a shocking revelation to the case. This quadruple homicide took the lives of 4 people and broke the hearts of many others. The victims' families were coping with the hard times, but it was especially hard for Melissa. Her life was perfect before it all came crashing down when her beloved husband was shot. Despite all this, Melissa knew she couldn't give up now that she had a new reason to continue living, and that was her son. When Melissa's son, Scott Ponder Jr., was born in June 2004, Melissa was still being called upon by the police at Interpol for interrogation. In one such incident, the police collected the DNA sample of Scott Jr. from a discarded diaper when Melissa had changed him at the station itself. The results of the DNA test left everyone dumbfounded. According to the reports, Scott Jr. was not the child of Scott, but Brian, since his DNA matched with Brian's found at the crime scene. This created tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who kept asking her if this was true. The detectives started to approach this case from the point of a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Questions about her being unfaithful to her husband spread all throughout the neighborhood. Moreover, Brian's mother stated that it was possible for Brian to have an affair considering how unhappy Brian was in his marriage, and the thought of divorce might have crossed his head at times. Melissa was called multiple times to the police station for interrogation about her affair, but she was resolute. She said that both she and Scott had struggled a lot to conceive this baby, and Scott Jr. was undoubtedly Scott Ponder's child. She later told about how she was harassed every day by the same questions when she knew it was hers and Scott's baby. For the next year and a half, detectives kept track of every move made by Melissa in order to find a breakthrough. Finally, after 18 months, however, the detectives claimed that there must have been a mistake regarding the blood sample collected at the crime scene. The detectives stated that they conducted a DNA test for Beverly and Scott from the blood sample collected from the crime scene, and the results did not match. In the reports, Brian's DNA matched Beverly's when, clearly, Scott was the son of Beverly. At this point, the detectives knew that they had made a grave mistake. They put the wrong name on the blood sample of Scott and Brian collected from the crime scene, since both the bodies of Scott and Brian were lying next to each other. This cleared up all the accusations laid against Melissa. Disregarding the love triangle theory, detectives now started to link the case with another homicide just 30 miles away that had happened just 5 months before the Superbike Motorsports homicide. On May 16, 2003, the people of Greer, South Carolina, heard the news of a triple homicide that took place in the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. Sylvia Holtzclaw was on duty that day, though she had a day off. Soon, a local couple, E.B. and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank. At around 1:30 p.m., a 911 call went through to the Greer Police Department regarding a shooting that had taken place in the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia, E.B., and Maggie were shot to death. Just like in the Superbike Motorsports, the shooting happened in broad daylight with no witnesses available. When police checked the CCTV footage, they saw a red car that was driving to the bank at around 1:24 p.m. and it was soon seen again when it was driving back from the bank 3 minutes after the incident. Coincidentally, a similar red car was spotted during the quadruple homicide at the Superbike Motorsports. Detectives started to hunt down the right car and found a clue that it was stolen by 39-year-old Emerson Wright from a rental lot days before the homicide. The police concluded that he'd entered the bank to rob, but panicked and shot the couple when they tried to intervene. Unfortunately, the detectives never got to question Emerson regarding the bank and the Superbike Motorsports murder because of how incidents unfurled 2 years later in another car chase involving him and the Georgia State Police. He was wanted for a series of burglaries in the Atlanta area. When he was chased by the state trooper, he crashed his car, got out, and shot himself with a single gunshot wound to his head. Later, the detectives declared that though there are similarities between the two cases, they didn't believe that the two cases were connected. Left with no clues or possible theories to continue their investigation, the quadruple homicide at the Superbike Motorsports turned into a cold case months later in 2004. For 13 years, Melissa, along with the other families of the victims, didn't stop with their efforts of finding any clue that might lead them to the person who was responsible for this atrocious crime, but to no avail. Finally, a ray of hope shone on them when the cold case of the quadruple murder that took place on November 6, 2003 in Superbike Motorsports reopened when the detectives got a breakthrough in the case in 2016, 13 years after the crime had been committed. The man behind the shooting came into the spotlight when he was arrested for a different murder that he committed, and during the interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports quadruple murder. This man was 45-year-old Todd Colehemp. Todd was born on March 7, 1971, to mother Reggie Tagg and father William Samsel. His parents divorced when he was 2 years old, and though he started to live with his mother and a new boyfriend, he wanted to spend more time with his biological father. Todd was extremely aggressive and hyper, at times not having self-resistance over his anger issues. He was a troublesome kid and showed hostility towards animals when he was in nursery school. He killed a goldfish with Clorox bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. He spent 3.5 months in Georgia Psychiatric Hospital, but there seemed to be no change in his aggressive behavior. His mother, Reggie, finally decided to send him to his father, William, hoping a change in the environment would help his behavior. On November 25, 1986, Todd planned a kidnapping of a girl named Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona. He knocked on her door, frightened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and demanded for her to follow him to his house. He brought her to his home, tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and then proceeded to assault her. Afterwards, he walked her home and threatened to kill the entire family if she told anyone about what had happened. Christy, however, confessed everything to her parents, and her father called 911 immediately. Cole Hemp was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. When he was released, Todd was a changed man. He started to work for himself and even got a job. No further complaints were heard against him until 2016. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Calla Brown and her boyfriend, the 32-year-old Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen going to Todd's house to remove brush from one of Todd's properties. On November 3, 2016, investigators found Calla chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on the property of Todd. Later, investigators also retrieved the body of Charlie that had multiple gunshot wounds in it. Calla told the detectives that Todd shot Charlie and took her chained up. He would always assault her in a barbaric manner and threatened her not to find ways to escape. Todd was immediately arrested by the police and taken in for questioning. During this arrest, Todd confessed to being the person behind the shooting that took place at the Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. When Todd was called in for the interrogation on November 5, 2016, he started to tell the detectives everything that happened on November 6, 2003. He didn't confess out of fear or guilt, but merely as if recalling a memory. He said that he bought a Suzuki GSX R750 from Superbike Motorsports, but just days after buying the bike, he realized he couldn't ride it. Having no prior knowledge of riding a bike, Todd then decided to exchange the bike for another one that would be much easier to ride for a beginner such as Todd. He then told the detective that he was mocked by Scott and Brian for his inability to ride such a bike. The bike exchange didn't take place that day and Todd returned home. 14 days after the purchase, the bike got stolen from the front of the apartment complex where Todd lived. He filed a police complaint regarding the stolen bike, but the police never recovered the vehicle. Todd also mentioned that even the law enforcement officer made fun of him. He lost a $1,000 deposit for insurance, but neither the police nor the shop contacted him after that regarding the stolen bike. Todd started college and went to Greenville Tech. His attraction towards bikes never faded, and soon he found himself going back to the Superbike Motorsports once again. He told the police that when he was browsing through the bikes in the shop, both Scott and Brian were giving negative remarks about him. Since then, whenever Todd visited the shop, the two men would mock and laugh at him. One day, he decided to take up a red 92 FS with him when he went to the shop. He waited for the customers to leave, and the shop was left with only Scott, Brian, Chris, and Beverly. Todd savagely shot all the victims to death. He later added that Beverly was not a target. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hearing the confession made by Todd gave the victims' families the long-drawn justice and the closure that they were seeking for the past. Later, Todd also confessed to have killed 3 more people who were Johnny Joe, Megan Leacoxey, and Charlie David Carver. These 3 victims also died due to gunshots fired by Todd Cole Hemp. In the case of Todd Cole Hemp, even though it was a serial killer case, there was no trial that took place. Instead, prosecutors spoke to the families of those he'd murdered as well as to the survivor and decided to give him a plea deal instead of taking him to trial where the state offered Todd life without the possibility of parole. which he accepted only 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition, he was sentenced to 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. Not having a trial did not give the satisfaction to the victims' families regarding the justice that was needed to be served. It also angered the general public. It's not fair for families to wait years and years for justice, 7th Circuit Solicitor Barry Barnett later told reporters. But Scott Ponder's wife Melissa said that she was finally relieved to get closure regarding her husband's death after all these years. All the family members and relatives of the victims came together to hold the Canda Lake Vigil in remembrance of their beloved, ones whom they'd lost to the hands of a serial killer. After 13 drawn-out years of pain and suffering, the victims' families were grateful to finally learn what exactly happened to their loved ones. In one interview, Scott's wife Melissa did state that the reason Todd gave for murdering Scott and the others didn't sit right with her, since she knew Scott well enough to know that he'd never make fun of someone and make them feel little in front of him. Nevertheless, she was grateful that justice had finally been served. The public was left disturbed by the lack of empathy and the casual behavior that Todd showed while being interrogated by the police or during his court appearances. They wanted Todd to receive the death penalty since he was a monster to society. Today's case was truly a twisted and disturbing one. 18-year-old Christian Aguilar was a freshman at the University of Florida. He was a talented young man and had obtained a scholarship to the university to study biomedical engineering. His brother described him as quiet and shy and said it took him a while to open up to people. But when he did, he was incredibly funny and charming with lots of charisma. While at university and living in Gainesville, he and his longtime friend, Erica Freeman, whom he'd known since school, became an item. From this point on, the pair were joined at the hip. Carlos, Christian's father, said he had never seen his son so happy as when he was dating her. Erica described them as soulmates and believed that one day they would get married. September 20th, 2012, would seemingly start as any other day. As usual, as soon as Erica finished her classes, she sent Christian a text message to arrange a meetup. At this point, they'd been dating for a little while, but their relationship was blossoming and they spent every day together. Always quick to respond, when Erica didn't hear back from Christian, she became a little concerned. Telling herself he must have been busy with something, she headed back to her apartment alone. Several hours would pass, however, and despite many calls and texts, Erica still had no idea where he was. She now knew something was wrong and walked to his dorm room to ask his roommate if he had seen him. Hours would pass with no word from Christian, and just after 4 a.m., Erica rang Christian's childhood friend, Pedro Bravo. The boys had gone shopping the day before, but Pedro said they had parted ways in the afternoon and he hadn't heard from him since. Frantic with worry, she decided to phone Christian's father, Carlos, 300 miles away in Miami, praying he might have heard from his son. But Carlos hadn't either. And knowing his son and how out of character this was, he and Christian's mother, Claudia, immediately set off for Gainesville, Florida. Just before 10 a.m. the next day, September 21st, Erica and Pedro met with Officer Timothy Peck of the University of Florida's Police Department to report Christian as missing. Christian, Erica, and Pedro had all known each other since attending Doral Academy together. Pedro and Erica had dated prior to her relationship with Christian. It hadn't worked out and she had ended the relationship shortly before going to college. Although Pedro had been upset about the breakup, he soon moved to Gainesville himself and it appeared that the trio from school were back together. Christian and Erica had yet to tell Pedro about their relationship and were waiting for him to be in a better place mentally before they broke the news. Growing more concerned by the hour, Erica made the police aware that Christian had suffered from depression and this rang more alarm bells. They wondered if maybe Christian had attempted to hurt himself in some way, so officers headed out to his apartment. They found absolutely nothing. Not a thing was out of place and there were no obvious signs of anything being disturbed. Pedro and Erica were both interviewed separately. Pedro said that the previous day he and Christian had left campus in Pedro's car. Christian got his flu shot and then they had driven to a Best Buy store to buy a CD and grab some lunch. The boys got into a verbal argument in Pedro's car, So Pedro dropped Christian off on a street and drove home by himself. Feeling guilty about the argument, he attempted to ring him, but to no avail, and he hadn't heard from him since. As well as Erica, Carlos, Christian's father, rang Pedro too to get the story. Pedro didn't know Gainesville very well, having only just enrolled in college there, and he couldn't remember the name of the street, so he tried describing the location as best he could. The area that Pedro appeared to be talking about was quite notorious, known for crime and drugs, and police began to worry that something had happened to him there. Police checked the CCTV cameras from Best Buy and quickly picked the pair up. Just as Pedro had said, on September 20th at around 3 p.m., Best Buy showed them both drinking coffee, browsing the aisles, and chatting to each other. But after this, there was nothing. Hundreds of cameras from all over the neighborhood that Pedro said he dropped him off in were still being checked. Days' worth of footage from local businesses and homes were being gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And Christian wasn't on a single one of them. Christian's family, volunteers, and multiple police departments in Florida were now searching for the missing freshman. One camera from a local car wash did pick up someone of interest, but it wasn't Christian as they had hoped. It was Pedro. Pedro had told police that he left Christian on the side of the road and driven straight home, but a camera from outside a car wash picked him up, power washing his car at 2 a.m. Police were drawing a blank and needed Pedro to explain. Pedro suddenly added more to his story. Despite Erica and Christian thinking they had kept their relationship a secret, Pedro told the police that he had recently found out that the pair were dating, and this had resulted in a fight that had become physical. After finding out that his ex-girlfriend and good friend were now dating, it had upset him. Pedro said that he hit Christian in the face, causing his nose to bleed all over the car. He said that after they had fought for a while, he kicked him out of the car and left him on the side of the road, almost unconscious, and drove away. Following this version of events, on the 24th of September, Pedro was placed under arrest for depriving a crime victim of medical care. This also gave officers more time to look into Pedro's claims, because his story just wasn't adding up. CCTV cameras were still drawing a blank about Christian's location after Pedro had left him. But one thing remained clear. The last person known to have seen him was Pedro. Alongside the blood in his car and the footage of him washing his vehicle at 2 a.m., police were looking at Pedro for more answers. Officers obtained a warrant to search his apartment. What they found truly shocked them. A receipt, dated just a few days before Christian was last seen, was retrieved. Following up on the date and time on the receipt, CCTV cameras had picked Pedro up. He was seen buying a shovel, duct tape, and sleeping pills. It was day 8 in the search for missing University of Florida student Christian Aguilar. The search for the missing University of Florida student was growing more intense. At least 100 people had joined the search party. Authorities said the missing 18-year-old University of Florida student was last spotted at a Best Buy in Gainesville. Also found in Pedro's apartment was Christian's backpack. Although they had yet to find Christian, they knew that he was no longer alive, and this was now a murder investigation. They had to start thinking the worst. The evidence was irrefutable. Pedro Bravo was subsequently arrested for Christian's murder. After 3 weeks of searching in an area around 60 miles from Gainesville, local hunters found human remains buried in a shallow grave. Using dental records, it was confirmed that the body was Christian Aguilar. An autopsy confirmed that he had been strangled and his ankles and wrists were both bound with duct tape. Pedro Bravo was still being investigated for the murder. But how and why had things possibly come to this? It all started years prior when Pedro Bravo developed a dangerous obsession with his now ex-girlfriend, Erica Freeman. Pedro was fixated on Erica, and when she broke up with him, he spent the next few months campaigning to win her back. When he found out that she had moved on, he set a plan in motion to remove Christian from the picture. Erica and Pedro had begun dating as sophomores. Although initially things seemed to be going well, Erica became unhappy and decided she needed to end the relationship. She tried to break up with him several times, but Pedro warned her that things would never be the same if she left him. Out of fear, Erica agreed to stay. However, as Erica and Pedro made plans to go to different colleges, Erica felt that this was now the right time to end the relationship and go their separate ways. Erica enrolled at Santa Fe Community College in Gainesville. She and Christian bumped into each other and a romance quickly blossomed, but just a few months into their time in Gainesville, Pedro turned up there too. He was originally set to attend Florida International University hundreds of miles away, but quickly decided to transfer to Santa Fe Community College to try and win Erica back. But Erica and Christian were now dating and very happy together. Pedro asked Erica several times if she and Christian were together, but Erica said they were just friends. The pair were conscious of Pedro's state of mind, as he was clearly still mentally in a bad place. Pedro had frequently spoken about committing suicide after the breakup. So Erica and Christian decided to keep the relationship a secret until they felt Pedro was ready to accept it and in a better headspace. Little did they know, Pedro was already well aware of the relationship and was completely consumed and enraged by it. Another item was recovered from the search of Pedro's apartment. It was a journal. It showed the extent of his obsessive thoughts and feelings and the lengths he was willing to go to. Endless pages of drawings, poems, quotes, and lyrics. Love letters to Erica and threats to Christian filled the book. Paragraphs and paragraphs of speeches saying things such as, "I can do this, I believe in myself, I will do it, I can win her back, I will win her back. No one will stop me, I will get into Gainesville and get her back. I will get out of Miami and into University of Florida." One entry from July read, "I'm scared she might end up with Chris." He then wrote underneath, "You are overreacting again. Remember that Chris goes to University of Florida and Erica goes to Santa Fe. So limited conversation and contact. Plus they don't talk much and he lives on campus. They have separate classes and schools. Plus you have time." His obsession with the pair of them was growing and completely consuming his life. On September 20th, Pedro had contacted Christian asking if he wanted to meet with him and go shopping. Pedro told Christian he wanted to confide in him about his depression and suicidal thoughts and get his advice. Worrying that he may have been trying to meet him to talk about his relationship with Erica, Christian was hesitant about going. But eventually, he decided he would go as the pair would be out in a public place and it felt safe. In the parking lot of Walmart as they sat in Pedro's car, Pedro subdued Christian using sleeping pills in a bottle of Gatorade and strangled him with a belt. Pedro's phone showed that he was in the Walmart car park for 2 hours that afternoon. He then put his phone in airplane mode for 5 hours and drove to a swampy area where he attempted to bury him. Logs from his iPhone 4 showed that the torch had been used 9 times for a total of 48 minutes that night. On the way home, Pedro stopped to get food at McDonald's and then went to wash the dirt off his car. But experts managed to find soil in the undercarriage of the vehicle. The shovel Pedro was seen buying also matched the soil that surrounded Christian's remains. In August 2014, almost 2 years since Christian's body was found, the trial of Pedro Bravo began. He entered a not guilty plea. Pedro's former cellmate, Michael Angelo, took the stand and testified that Pedro had told him it had taken him 13 minutes to kill Christian, and he had originally had several plans for how he was going to carry out the violent attack. Michael also led officers to where Pedro had told him he had hidden the shovel under a wooden walkway at his apartment complex. He said at one point, Pedro panicked as he almost got caught by a security guard driving past the vehicle as he was strangling Christian. Pedro took the stand in his own defense, and he was the only witness the defense team called to the stand during the 2-week trial. A big moment in the courtroom was the showing of a screenshot of the iPhone feature Hey Siri. Although it was initially reported that Pedro had asked Siri questions relating to the awful act he would go on to commit, Gainesville police and experts disputed that. The screenshot in question had been viewed using the phone, but it had been viewed via Facebook. Pedro had an iPhone 4 which did not have Siri compatibility. The footage was eventually pulled from the courtroom. The defense team argued that although Pedro had a physical altercation with Christian and was wrong to leave him at the side of the road, he most definitely didn't kill him. Pedro had said that the duct tape was being used to seal a crack in the window of his car, and the shovel was brought with the intention of him killing himself and digging his own grave. Pedro claimed he tried to kill himself after his fight with Christian by drinking a concoction of painkillers and pesticide. He quickly threw up and said he took it as a sign from God that it wasn't his time to go. But the case against Pedro was too strong. DNA and forensic evidence, CCTV footage, his journal, and a pattern of very disturbing and obsessive behavior meant that the jury took just 3 hours to deliberate. Pedro Bravo was convicted of first-degree murder, poisoning, false imprisonment, tampering with evidence, giving false information to authorities, and improper transportation of human remains. The judge sentenced Pedro Bravo to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although he didn't take his own life, Pedro did write a suicide note in prison that was found by a prison guard. An extract of the note read, "I'm a monster for hurting Chris." Despite this and the confession he gave to his former cellmate, Pedro still denied killing Christian upon his sentencing. He said God knows the truth about what happened. Throughout the trial, Pedro continuously attempted to contact the Aguilar family and Erica, and upon his sentencing, Carlos Aguilar begged the judge to help prevent him from ever contacting his family or Erica again. The Aguilar family were relieved and satisfied with the verdict. Carlos said, "The reality is, the verdict will not bring my son back, but Pedro was held accountable. I promised Christian at his burial there would be justice." The funeral for Christian Aguilar was held in Miami. It was open to the public and packed out. A kind and loving young man with a life full of such promise was cut so dreadfully short. Erica Freeman said of Christian, "He was such a good person, so kind and so compassionate. I always feel like when I describe him, I'm never describing him enough. You had to meet him." Ardith Wood, a stunning 27-year-old, was not only beautiful, but also exceptionally intelligent. She was on the path to earning a doctoral degree in philosophy from Waterloo University while simultaneously working as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardith's dream of becoming a professor was about to come true. The summer of 2003 arrived. Ardith decided to spend her vacation visiting her family in Ottawa, Canada. She had a wonderful time with her loved ones, going on walks together and cooking at home. On the morning of August 6th, the young woman went for a run. When she returned, her thoughtful parents were already waiting for her with a delicious breakfast dessert. It was a warm and sunny day, so Ardith decided to go for a bike ride. Her brother kindly allowed her to borrow his bicycle. The girl promised to be back in a couple of hours. That day, her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, awaiting her daughter's return from the ride. Ardith loved cycling along the picturesque route through the forest, past the river and cliffs. This trail was popular among local cyclists. It was always peaceful and safe here, but not this time. 27-year-old Ardith never came home. Her mother was worried about her, and then a heavy downpour started. The woman understood that her daughter wouldn't be riding in such weather, but time passed, and she still wasn't back. The family set out to search, assuming the girl might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Bike paths wound through the entire city, and they didn't know which direction Ardith had gone this time, so her relatives searched all over town. Their efforts were fruitless, and when it got dark, they went to the police. Due to the bad weather, the search was postponed until morning. The next day, there was no news about Ardith. One of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history began. It involved rescuers, police officers, dog handlers with their canines and helicopters. In total, about 1,000 people, including numerous volunteers. Ardith's family actively participated in the search, posting flyers with the girl's photo all around the city. But the first few days yielded no progress. The police turned to the public for help. Soon a call came from a local resident. She said that on the day of Ardith's disappearance, she was in the forest on the bike path and saw a creepy guy with a bicycle there. The witness described him as a young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed, but behaving extremely suspiciously. His conduct was frightening. It turned out the stranger had tried to push the girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, other people appeared on the trail. The perpetrator fell behind and she managed to escape quickly. After this incident, she no longer felt safe on walks and stopped cycling alone. According to the girl, it happened in an area called Green Creek. She suggested that the stranger might have attacked Ardith as well. The eyewitness was invited to the police station to create a composite sketch. She described the suspect as a young man, 20-30 years old, light-skinned, dark-haired with a beard and glasses, pleasant-looking and athletically built. The sketch was shown to Ardith's family, but they didn't recognize anyone familiar to the missing woman. Many men wore similar glasses and beards at the time, so suspicion could fall on anyone. The investigators decided not to publish the portrait in the media, fearing a wave or false calls. The police constantly asked local residents for help, showing Ardith's photo. Law enforcement was confident. Such a bright, beautiful girl with a memorable appearance couldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone must have seen her and could provide a lead. This assumption proved true. 16-year-old Laura called the police. She said that on the day of the disappearance, while riding past on her bicycle, she saw Ardith on the bike trail. The missing woman was sitting on a rock, seemingly resting. When Laura rode further, she heard a scream. Turning around, the girl saw Ardith arguing with some guy. Laura didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just a lover's quarrel. Ardith wasn't calling for help. And then she went into the woods with that man. Laura wanted to find out what was happening, but got scared. Seeing the approaching storm, the 16-year-old witness hurried home. As she was leaving, she thought she heard someone screaming. The police invited Laura to the station to show her the composite sketch of the stranger. She recognized him. According to the girl, it all happened around 1 p.m. in the same place, Green Creek. Later, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered this creepy guy on the trail. He attacked them, but the victims were lucky to escape. One woman's call particularly stood out. She recounted how an attractive stranger approached her during a walk. They had a pleasant conversation, but suddenly his behavior changed drastically. The men started grabbing her, but the woman managed to push the attacker away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't even look back, afraid he would catch up. After returning home, the woman told her family about the incident and warned her loved ones to stay away from that place. Oddly, none of the girls who were attacked reported it to the police. The search for Ardith concentrated around the creek area. Soon, her bicycle was found, indicating the police were on the right track. Meanwhile, the investigators received another call that became a breakthrough in the case. A man, without giving his name, reported an unpleasant incident in the forest. Terrible accident. Allegedly, he didn't want to harm our Defoteca life. Confused, he decided to get rid of the body. The stranger carried the girl across the creek, dug a small pit and buried her there, covering the grave with branches. Then he hung up. The police managed to trace the call. It was made from a phone booth 20 minutes away from Ottawa. Law enforcement rushed there, hoping to find witnesses or lift fingerprints or DNA from the receiver. But disappointment awaited them. Someone had thoroughly wiped the handset. Neither eyewitnesses nor surveillance cameras could be found. The search for Ardith continued in Green Creek. Dogs trained to detect the smell of corpses arrived at the scene. Soon, the worst fears of the family and the police were confirmed. With the help of the dogs, they managed to find the missing woman's grave located between two trees in a quiet, picturesque spot. Coming closer, the detectives saw the half-buried naked body of the girl. Likely, the criminal was startled by someone, which is why he buried the victim so sloppily. Criminologists started examining the crime scene, but unfortunately found no evidence, no fingerprints or DNA. The medical examiner confirmed it was Ardith Wood. She died a horrific, agonizing death that didn't resemble an accident at all, contrary to what the stranger said in his conversation with the police. The cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, so the girl was still alive when she ended up in the water. Despite the body being found naked, the medical examiners didn't find unequivocal signs of rape, although they didn't rule it out. The police believed the crime was sexually motivated. In their opinion, the stranger hunted girls in a deserted place for this purpose. Otherwise, what else could have driven him? The detectives needed to catch the criminal urgently to avoid new victims. They were convinced he had attacked several girls and had already killed one. How far could the maniac go? The police decided to publish a composite sketch of the suspect in the media, asking the public for help in identifying him. Investigators received about 4,000 calls with leads and began processing them. which took a lot of time. On September 10th, the police released important information about the suspect. It turned out that the girls who saw the stranger in the forest had noticed one detail. He had an eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This was a crucial lead that could help track down the criminal. The media published a sketch of the tattoo, after which several calls came to the police. People reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on their faces, necks, or backs. However, this information led nowhere. In April 2004, while processing another batch of calls, investigators came across an important clue. A man claimed he knew the killer. The person lived in the area and was riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity of the time of the crime. The detectives were interested in this information and invited the specified suspect for a conversation. When the guy entered the police station, the investigators were amazed. He matched the criminal's description both in appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man was noticeably nervous. He said he often rode his bike along that trail, not understanding what the issue was. When the police asked him to show his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was found there. It turned out that the man had previously had problems with the law. He became the prime suspect. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. The entire time, the suspect answered questions defiantly and aggressively. He said about himself, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." The guy had no alibi, but couldn't say what he was doing on the day of our death's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the girl's murder. There was insufficient evidence against him, so the suspect was released, but placed under surveillance. A few weeks later, he was invited for questioning again. The detectives had gathered a lot of information about him and carefully prepared their questions. They also suggested the young man take a polygraph test. The suspect agreed and easily passed all the tests. The police couldn't believe it but had to let him go. Got all suspicions. The investigation had reached a dead end. The Ottawa police announced a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case. It was the largest amount law enforcement had ever offered under similar circumstances. Soon, about 5,000 calls with leads came in, which the police began to check. One portion of information mentioned the name Christopher Myers, which caught the investigators' attention. It turned out he had previous convictions for selling prohibited substances. Colleagues described 25-year-old Chris as a quiet, non-confrontational, and even inconspicuous guy who worked as a janitor. His face was remarkably similar to the composite sketch of the suspect. Moreover, he had the same beard. The police were delighted, thinking they had finally found the right man. But it turned out Christopher had an alibi for the day of our death's disappearance. The landlady of the apartment he was renting claimed that on August 6, 2003, the young man was at home in the morning and then went to work at a restaurant. This surprised the police because a year had already passed. How could the woman remember the details of that day so clearly? Another problem arose. Christopher didn't have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder. Although witnesses insisted they had seen this tattoo on him, maybe he had it removed. The detectives were convinced this was the person they needed and had to prove it. A few weeks later, another similar attack occurred. In the evening, a girl who closely resembled Ardith was walking alone across a bridge when she heard someone walking behind her. Turning around, she saw an attractive man on a bicycle. The girl had no intention of making acquaintances or talking and asked to be left alone. The man rode past her, and just as she sighed with relief, the stranger turned his bicycle around and rushed straight at her. There was no one around who could help. The attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the victim into the bushes. The girl screamed very loudly, which seemed to frighten the assailant. He fled. The victim went to the police. Other investigators took on this case. Everyone assumed it was an attempted robbery, and the detectives investigating our death's disappearance found out about the incident much later. In May, another attack occurred on a tall blonde woman similar to the missing person. The girl was returning late in the evening from a party when a stranger approached her and tried to strike up a conversation. She asked to be left alone. Then he started asking for help, claiming he was lost. The girl explained where he should go, and he left. She breathed a sigh of relief, but literally 10 minutes later, he attacked her from the bushes. The assailant furiously began strangling her, twisting her neck. At that moment, the girl thought it was the end, but she continued to resist, screaming, hitting him, biting. Her screams attracted the attention of the residents of the building, who came out to see what was happening. This frightened the criminal and he fled, but this time he made a serious mistake. In his haste, he dropped his phone. Investigators established that the mobile belonged to Christopher Myers, whom they suspected in the Odd Death murder case. The puzzle came together. Chris committed all the similar crimes. He chose girls with similar appearances, blondes, and attacked them. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he wasn't in a hurry to confess to the murder. He said he had never been to Green Creek, had never seen our death, and wasn't involved in the other attacks. Chris complained about mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he hadn't caused physical harm to anyone. The detectives noticed he had crooked teeth and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The test lasted 5 hours, and Chris failed it miserably. But despite this, he still continued to claim his innocence, saying the polygraph was wrong. Since the results of the lie detector test weren't considered evidence, the suspect had to be released. For the next 5 months, detectives gathered evidence against him, interrogating everyone who knew Christopher, relatives, friends, colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend. It turned out Christopher was born into a dysfunctional family of alcoholics. His difficult childhood was accompanied by the development of various mental disorders: attention deficit disorder and schizoid disorder. Chris was taken from his birth family and adopted by another couple. The adoptive parents treated the boy with love, but he was uncontrollable. They couldn't cope with raising the troubled child and returned him to the orphanage when Chris turned 12. As he grew older, he seemed to become an ordinary, normal guy. Christopher graduated from school, entered university, socialized with friends, and lived in a dormitory. But his roommate considered Chris abnormal. He told creepy stories that frightened her. Eventually, she kicked him out of the room. Chris's ex-girlfriend revealed that he loved cycling along the trails of Ottawa and was fascinated by the picturesque scenery. She also disclosed his main secret. Christopher enjoyed temporary tattoos. For a while, he had the exact image of an eagle on his shoulder. The girl was shown a sketch of the tattoo, and she confirmed that he had the same one on his left shoulder. Christopher was summoned for questioning on October 13, 2005. He was placed in a very cramped interrogation room. This time, the conversation was conducted by burly men who pushed their chairs right up against Chris. All this put tremendous psychological pressure on the suspect. The investigators started with simple words. "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed our death." Christopher responded evasively. 3 hours later, he began to give testimony. Confused and inconsistent, Chris admitted that he was in Green Creek that day and met our death. Struck by her beauty, he decided to get acquainted. He started giving compliments, chatting nicely, and then invited the girl into the woods, and she agreed. Once there, Christopher began hugging and kissing her, showing the detectives exactly how. And then, according to him, it all ended. Ardith recoiled from him. Apparently, she didn't like his manners. She ran away but fell into the creek. Christopher tried to save the girl but failed. He wanted to portray himself as a hero, but this absolutely didn't correspond to his subsequent actions. For some reason, he pulled Ardith's body out of the water, undressed it, and buried it. When the policeman stated that Chris was going to be charged with murder, he immediately retracted his words. "No, I never met her. It was a joke. I took all the information from the newspapers." The detective had to have a serious one-on-one conversation with him. Eventually, Chris confessed to killing Ardith. He even drew a map with the trails in Green Creek where he met the girl. On it, he marked another person, Laura, who saw him with the victim in the forest. Laura recognized the suspect as the same man she had seen then. Christopher was arrested on October 20th, 2005. He agreed to go to the crime scene to recreate the events. But when they arrived at the indicated trail, Christopher suddenly declared that it wasn't the right location, claiming everything happened elsewhere, although everything matched. Christopher had an unstable psyche. He would give testimony and then retract his words. Later, he also confessed to other attacks on girls. He was charged with additional crimes for these offenses. At the trial, the lawyer stated that Christopher was just a troubled young man. At first, the accused denied his previous confessions, but later, on the advice of his defense attorney, he decided to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after the murder, the defendant confessed to the crime but refused to disclose the motives and details. Later, he also admitted to the other attacks. The prosecution believed that on that day, Chris wasn't on the forest trail by chance. He was stalking his prey like a hunter. He attacked several girls who were lucky enough to escape. The likely motive was sexual assault. Ardith was unlucky that day. She was Christopher's type, an attractive blonde. He tried to get acquainted with her, but something went wrong, and an argument broke out between them, which was overheard by a teenage girl riding by. Under some pretext, the killer managed to lure Ardith into the woods. There, he attacked her, started undressing her, intending to rape her. To save herself, the girl ran away and jumped into the creek. Chris rushed after her, caught up, and drowned her, then buried the body. The victim's parents agreed with the prosecution's version. According to them, Ardith was a good swimmer and couldn't have drowned in the creek. In their opinion, the defendant deliberately drowned the girl. However, it remained a mystery to them how Christopher managed to convince Ardith to go into the woods with him. As part of the deal with the investigation, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a right to parole only after 10 years. In 2020, he filed a relevant petition, but the commission rejected it, recognizing the high risk of repeated crimes against women. In 2007, a plaque in memory of our death was installed on one of the centuries-old oaks in Green Creek Park. And in 2017, during a powerful thunderstorm, just like on the day of a murder, lightning struck the same tree. The oak suffered serious damage, and experts didn't believe it would survive. But a miracle happened. The mighty tree withstood. It still grows as a living monument to the girl who was killed nearby. Sally Ann Bowman was born to parents Linda and Paul on September 11, 1987, and enjoyed a close and tight-knit relationship with her family. She was happy-go-lucky, incredibly friendly, and had a huge heart. She was also very mature for her age and wanted to work hard to support herself. So she made the big step to move out of the family home and live by herself in a rented room. Although she had moved out in her late teens, she still made sure to see her family as often as she could, and she would never go too long without meeting up with them. Bright and bubbly, performing was a huge passion for Sally Ann, and she was accepted into the Brit School for Performing Arts. The prestigious school boasts among its alumni actor Tom Holland and singers Adele and Amy Winehouse. For Sally Ann, getting into the selective and distinguished school was an incredible achievement and one more step towards her dreams. She also had a successful modeling career and took every opportunity that came her way. On the 24th of September 2005, 18-year-old Sally Ann was staying at her mother's house. She spent the day relaxing, and then her sister Nicole rang and asked if she wanted to go out in the evening to celebrate the birthday of Nicole's best friend. At around 6 p.m., Sally Ann got ready and headed off. As she left, her mother told her she loved her, and Sally Ann said she loved her back and walked off down the driveway. She met up with her sister and friends and headed to one of their favorite spots in the center of town. She was caught on CCTV in the bar, laughing, dancing, and enjoying her girls' night out. As the night started to wind down, she left with sister Nicole and walked out into Croydon Town Center. Not long after, she began talking to her ex-boyfriend, Louis Sproston, on the phone. They had ended their relationship only a few weeks before, and Sally Ann desperately wanted to see him. She got a taxi from her sister's back into Croydon, where Louis met her in his car. He picked her up at around 2:20 a.m. and drove her to her house in Blenheim Crescent, where she was renting a room. With the breakup being only a matter of weeks ago, emotions were still very raw, and soon into their journey, the pair started arguing in the car. The argument went on until around 4:15 a.m., and Sally Ann then got out of the car, and Louis drove off. A witness said they were woken by the sound of a garbled noise ending with a scream. The witness then got out of bed and looked out of their window, but couldn't see anything. The air was still, and there was no other noise coming from the street. They returned to the window about 5 minutes later and kept their lights off. They saw a man walking down the streets, but with no other noise and no one else around. They left the window and went back to bed. At around 6:30 that morning, a neighbor went outside and saw what they assumed were the legs of a mannequin protruding from behind a builder's skip. After going over to investigate, they were met with a truly horrific sight. It was the body of Sally Ann Bowman. She was partially clothed, and it was clear that she was deceased. Police quickly arrived on scene and sealed off the area. The murder squad was called in, and an investigation swiftly got underway. This would become the largest investigation London had ever seen. Linda Bowman heard knocking at her front door. She said she assumed it was Sally and she had been locked out. As she opened the door, she was met with 3 police officers who asked her if she was Linda Bowman and if she knew Sally Ann. She explained that Sally Ann was her youngest daughter. The officer then told her the devastating news. Her beloved child had been found stabbed to death. She said, "I just remember screaming, absolutely screaming. I just couldn't believe it. My whole world fell apart." Police then had to break the news to her sister Michelle. Michelle said, "I remember something leaving me that day and it's never ever come back." Within a few hours of the investigation being launched, her sister and mother were faced with a terrible ordeal of formally identifying her body. Michelle said, "I remember going into the room and for a split second I thought it wasn't her because her hair was dark. And I just moved forward and saw her little button nose and her freckles, and that was it." Her devastated mother said she fell apart upon seeing Sally Ann's body, and Michelle was crying, "Please wake her up, Mom. Please wake her up." 2 days after Sally Ann had been found, her family made the incredibly difficult decision to find out more from the police. Stuart Cundy went to Linda's house with other officers to talk the family through it. What happened in the few minutes following Sally Ann getting out of Lewis's vehicle remains unclear, but what investigators were able to piece together was that Sally Ann was standing alone in the driveway of her house, less than 10 meters from the safety of her front door, when she was caught off guard in a frenzied and violent attack. During the attack, Sally Ann Bowman was stabbed at least 7 times, with 3 of the stab wounds being so strong they passed through her body. There was also evidence to suggest that she had been sexually assaulted post-mortem. She had also been bitten several times, which had left DNA evidence. The peace and tranquility of this quiet suburban street had been shattered, and a sadistic, violent killer was now on the run. Her ex-boyfriend Lewis was quickly identified as a potential suspect. As he and Sally Ann had fought the night she was killed, and he had been one of the last people to see her alive, this was soon made a focus of the investigation. Officers quickly mobilized in the hunt was now on to find Lewis Broston. He was soon located with his brother and a friend. He identified himself and was subsequently arrested and brought in for questioning. Over the next 4 days, the murder squad questioned Lewis and took samples of his DNA. He maintained he knew nothing about Sally Ann's murder until the police arrived to talk to him. His DNA sample was sent to be examined to try and ascertain whether or not it matched the DNA found on Sally Ann's body. It appeared to be an open and shut case, a lover's tiff that had ended in tragedy. But when the call came from the Forensic Science Service, it was the news that nobody was anticipating. The DNA was a match, but not to Lewis Broston. It matched a disturbing sexual assault cold case from 4 years ago, just a mile and a half away from where Sally Ann had been brutally murdered. Lewis was released from custody following this evidence. The police were now in a race against time to find a killer whose crimes were not only seemingly escalating, but was capable of striking again at any time. Cold case in question was extremely disturbing. Back in 2001, a woman was making a call in a telephone box by the car park of a Tesco store when a man approached her. He proceeded to expose himself and perform a sex act upon himself before leaving his DNA on the floor of the phone box. He then casually walked away across the car park, leaving his terrified victim extremely shaken. Although police had a DNA profile of the attacker, the case soon went cold. Officers who were now working on Sally Ann's case were faced with a horrifying question. If this person had attacked someone in 2001 and then murdered a young woman 4 years later, what had he done in the years in between and how many more victims were there? And since he had now committed a brutal and frenzied murder, where and when would he strike next? It wasn't long before the worst fears of officers were realized. Less than an hour before Sally Ann Bowman was murdered on her doorstep, another woman had been attacked in nearby Sandestead Road. The woman in question had been standing on the street on her mobile phone when a man came up behind her. All he said was, "I'm sorry," before proceeding to hit her. Officers were convinced that had the offender not been disturbed by a taxi coming down Sandestead Road, the attack would have escalated. Before running away, he grabbed the victim's mobile phone. The call was still connected and the person on the other end of the line had heard everything. What is most disturbing is that the screams of the victim did not get quieter, meaning the man who had attacked her and grabbed her phone was hiding nearby, watching what was happening. Thankfully, the taxi driver quickly got her into the car and drove her to hospital. The victim was able to provide a detailed description of the man who had assaulted her, and from this the police were able to issue an e-fit of the man they were looking for. Police believe this was the same man who, less than 60 minutes later, would go on to murder Sally Ann Bowman. The e-fit was widely circulated, which led to many calls from the public. Despite the publicity of the e-fit and many desperate to help, the break officers desperately needed in the case didn't come. The murder squad regrouped and returned to the DNA sample that had been found on Sally Ann Bowman's body. They knew this profile held the key to unlocking the case and catching the man responsible for this disturbing crime spree. Investigators strongly suspected that the killer was local to the area and knew it well. Based on this, police decided to conduct a DNA screening of the area. The task before them was huge. They had 6,000 addresses to go through, and every single one would need to disclose how many men lived at the property or were staying there the night Sally Ann Bowman was murdered. There were 4,000 men in the South Croydon area that fit the description. They knew the chance of the killer coming forward and offering his DNA was next to none, but they hoped that maybe a relative such as a brother or father might come forward, thus providing that crucial link. Despite the initial promise of the DNA testing center, 6 months after the murder, the investigation was slowing down and officers were running out of options. The people of South Croydon were living in fear. Not knowing where the killer would strike next left them terrified. As the investigation was starting to stall, in March 2006, officers decided to change strategy and go back to the e-fit of the man who had attacked a woman less than an hour before Sally Ann was killed. The police were sure that this was the same man who had savagely murdered Sally Ann Bowman. They decided to release another e-fit of the man who had attacked the woman in the phone box 4 years earlier. The man with the same DNA as Sally Ann's killer. The victim from the phone box didn't complete an e-fit in the initial investigation from 2001, and officers were hopeful she would be able to add more to their investigation. Along with the release of the new e-fit, after consulting with Sally Ann's family, officers decided it was important for the public to understand the horrific nature of the murder and the level of violence that had been used, and so they held a press conference. People needed to know just how dangerous this man was. Over new leads would come in following this press conference. They too would go nowhere. However, it wasn't long before the police finally got the break they were looking for, 20 miles away in Crawley. A man was in a pub watching the World Cup final between England and Trinidad and Tobago. He had had a significant amount of alcohol and began arguing with another man there. The argument spilled out onto the street and CCTV caught the scuffle on camera. After the man shoved the other to the floor, a nearby police officer intervened, broke up the fight, and the man was arrested. He was soon identified as 35-year-old Mark Dixie and was taken in for questioning. His demeanor during the interview was strange. He was described as very tearful and incredibly emotional, despite the relatively minor nature of the offense. As is custom, his fingerprints and DNA were taken and he was released on police bail. 12 days later, the news that everyone on the murder squad had been hoping for finally arrived. They had had a hit with the DNA from Sally Ann's body. It was a confirmed match for Mark Dixie. The police now had to find Dixie before another woman was attacked. Worryingly, he wasn't in the country. He had fled to the capital city of the Netherlands, Amsterdam, to avoid the manhunt. After 3 months there, He had an argument with his landlord and so returned to the United Kingdom. He went back to his job as a pub chef. When he was arrested for the fight in the street, he had told the police that the address of the pub was where he was staying. Knowing how dangerous he was and with the environment he worked in giving him access to knives, officers needed to get him out of the pub kitchen. As they were scouting the building to try and find a side entrance, Mark Dixie was coming out. Officers quickly apprehended him and brought him into custody. The arresting officer described putting his hand across Dixie's chest to stop him from running away. He said he could feel his heartbeat. His heartbeat never changed, and Dixie remained unusually calm considering the nature of the offense he was being arrested for. The only comment he made when he was being booked into the custody suite was, "I must have been mad to have done that." The following day, Mark Dixie was charged with the murder of Sally and Bowman. He remained silent as the charge sheet was read out. The family liaison officer, Graham Bannatyne, called Linda at around 9 p.m. and asked if he could come to the family home. He was finally able to give the devastated Bowman family the news they had waited so long to hear. The man who had viciously taken Sally Ann's life was finally in custody. But who exactly was Mark Dixie? And how had he evaded capture for so long? Born in Streatham in 1970, he had a troubled childhood. His parents divorced when he was 18 months old. His mother remarried and Dixie took the name Mark James MacDonald, using his stepfather's surname. But throughout his life, he would use 5 known aliases, including Mark Philip Dixie, Mark James Down, Stephen MacDonald, and Shane Turner. During his childhood, he was also moved to a children's home. He soon developed a long rap sheet, with his crimes taking place before it was mandatory to take a DNA sample upon arrest. In 1986, he robbed a woman at knife point in Stockwell and he was sentenced to 6 weeks in prison. A year later, he was convicted of robbery, and in 1988, he received a 2-year sentence for indecent assault and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. In 1989, he was convicted again of indecent exposure and received a sentence of 80 hours community service. Another conviction came in 1990 after he assaulted a police officer. To the horror of investigators, this criminal activity was not limited to the UK. In 1993, Dixie moved to Australia, but soon ran into trouble there. He overstayed his visa and the crime spree started again. In 1998, a 19-year-old Thai student was alone in her house in Perth when she heard noises coming from her kitchen. After going to investigate, she came face to face with Mark Dixie, who was wearing a stocking pulled over his head. He was also armed with a knife. She was stabbed 7 times and subsequently lost consciousness. He then proceeded to sexually assault her before stealing items from her house and fleeing. Thankfully, she survived the horrifying ordeal. The crimes didn't stop there. On New Year's Day in 1999, Dixie had spotted a young woman running along the road near Bunbury, a few hours south of Perth. He stopped his car ahead in the road before taking off his clothes and hiding in a bush. He then jumped out at the woman and asked her to perform a sex act. He received a fine of $750 3 days later, and in April of 1999 he was deported from Australia. Following the formal charge for Sally Ann's murder, the work for investigators was just beginning. Over the next 18 months, the police painstakingly pieced together Dixie's movements to try and explain how and why he had murdered 18-year-old Sally Ann. They needed the case to be watertight. They spoke to friends and those who knew him and learned that he had been out on the 24th of September celebrating his birthday, the same night he had killed Sally Ann. He went out with friends to a pub on Brighton Road, only a few hundred yards from where Sally Ann had lived on Blenheim Crescent. Birthdays were very important to Dixie, and previous partners said he always expected something significant on his birthday. That night, his partner hadn't gone out with him. While in the pub, he called her, and when he returned to the table, his friend said he was like a completely different person. He was withdrawn, subdued, and clearly angry, and spent the rest of the evening drinking in excess and taking more drugs. When the pub closed, he and 2 female friends left for Avondale Road, where he was going to stay with them. This too was only a few hundred yards from Blenheim Crescent. The 2 women headed to bed in the early morning hours, but Mark Dixie didn't. Police believe that he left the property sometime between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. Police also believe he took a knife with him as he left, with the intent on finding a woman and attacking her. Investigators strongly suspect he was the person that attacked the woman on Sandestead Road and was frustrated when he failed to carry out his fantasy. After he ran away to nearby Blenheim Crescent, it appeared that Sally Ann Bowman was tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time. Officers theorized that after murdering Sally Ann, he didn't leave the area immediately, but instead hid to see if any neighbors would come out to investigate. No neighbor appeared and no lights in the houses went on. He didn't know, however, that a witness had heard Sally Ann scream and was looking out of her bedroom window while keeping her bedroom light off. Police believe the man she saw walking back in the direction where Sally Ann was found was Mark Dixie. Assuming nobody was watching him, he returned to the body and sexually assaulted her. He then went back to the property he was staying at with his two female friends and fell asleep on the sofa. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. During their inquiries, officers reached out to Australian police saying he was in custody and to check if his DNA matched any of the crimes they had on record. It came back with a match to the attack on the Thai student in Perth in the 1990s. On the February 5, 2008, Mark Dixie arrived at the Old Bailey Courthouse in London and his detached and cold demeanor left the courtroom in shock. During the trial, the Thai woman from Perth gave evidence that Dixie had stabbed and raped her in 1998. He has yet to be formally charged with this attack, though a DNA sample from her underwear has been matched to him. Dixie's defense was staggering. He admitted to being the rapist and leaving his DNA on Sally Ann's body. He said he had stumbled across what he thought was a drunk girl lying unconscious and took the opportunity to sexually assault her. He said he was not the man who had taken Sally Ann's life, but that the real killer was still out there. He never once offered an explanation for his appalling crimes. Before long, it was time for the jury to deliver their verdict. Mark Dixie was found guilty in a unanimous decision. He received a mandatory life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. This is among one of the longest minimum terms to ever be given to a single murderer. This also means that before he can even be considered for parole, he will be at least 70 years old. He began his sentence at Belmarsh, a Category A prison. A Category A prison is reserved for highly dangerous offenders that pose great risk to the public. He was then moved to Long Lartin Prison after other inmates threatened to attack him at Belmarsh. In 2014, it was revealed that he had been moved again to another prison, HMP Franklin. This too was for his own protection. DCI Chris LePere, who was part of the murder squad, described him as one of the most frightening people he had ever encountered during his entire career. Due to the importance of DNA solving her daughter's case, Linda Bowman is a vocal advocate for a compulsory DNA database. She believes that had DNA not been found, Lewis Sproston may have been wrongfully convicted. Stuart Cundy, who led the investigation into Sally Ann Bowman's murder, agreed, saying, "It is my opinion that a national DNA register, with all its appropriate safeguards, could have identified Sally Ann's murderer within 24 hours. Instead, it took nearly 9 months before Mark Dixie was identified and almost 2.5 years for justice to be done." Their calls for a DNA database were rejected by ministers and other politicians who argued it would be impractical, as well as have negative implications for civil liberties. After years of denial, in January 2015, Mark Dixie finally confessed to murdering Sally Ann Bowman. In 2017, Mark Dixie was charged with yet more offenses, and it was revealed that someone had been wrongfully convicted for some of his depraved crimes. In 2003, a Dutch national named Romano van der Dusen was convicted of raping 3 women in the Costa del Sol. He served 12 years in a Spanish prison and was routinely attacked by fellow inmates. Horrifyingly, the real rapist Mark Dixie was a free man. In June 2015, a Dutch newspaper reported that Dixie had confessed to one of the sexual assaults, but not the other 2. Romano van der Dusen was eventually acquitted in 2016, and was present at Southwark Crown Court on November 24, 2017, as Mark Dixie was given 2 more life sentences for attacks on 2 other women in Croydon. His crimes went back to when he was just 16 years old. He admitted to raping a woman in the deserted Wandle Road car park in 1987, leaving her bound and gagged as he set her car on fire. According to the judge, she was delighting in her evident fear. He ran away with her credit card details, and later that night, he called her home phone to taunt and terrify her. He called again the following evening. The victim was so traumatized, she moved to the country to be as isolated as possible. He also confessed to hitting a woman over the head with a chef's iron and then dragging her to an isolated spot on Selston Road in 2002 where he indecently assaulted her. The victim had been leaving messages on her boyfriend's phone as she walked home, but on the last message she could be heard screaming and dropping the phone. Dixie was only stopped when a concerned neighbor scared him off. He later used the victim's mobile phone that he had taken from the scene to call her boyfriend and brag about what he had done to her. The victim was left with multiple skull fractures. Mark Dixie's cold-hearted and detached manner was evident. He said it could have been worse. When Mark Dixie was convicted of these attacks in 2017, Chris LaPierre had been on the team investigating Sally Ann's murder, said, "I hope today's sentence will bring a small measure of closure to these two women. With the advancement in forensic technology, we were able to link Dixie to these offenses and bring him to justice. Although the sentence will never bring their beloved daughter and sister back, the Bowman family were full of admiration for the police, especially their family liaison officer Graham Bannatyne, who gave them invaluable support during the investigation. The damage caused by Mark Dixie is immeasurable. Lives have been shattered. Women have lived in fear. An innocent man was wrongfully convicted, and a family are left without their beloved daughter and sister." Michelle, the sister of Sally and Bowman, said, "You get that split second in the morning when you wake up and your life is perfect. Everything's how you want it to be. And then bang, it's there and it hits you. Worrying to close your eyes, not knowing what you're going to see. Not knowing if you're going to see that Sally you remember or that Sally you see from the pictures. And that fear goes through me every night when I go to sleep. The nightmares don't ever stop. There's not anything in this world that will ever make it better, because she will never come back." Carly was born on April 14, 1983, in the family of Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. She was a cheerful and outgoing child with a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, Carly started experiencing more and more problems. She started abusing alcohol and illegal substances. Nevertheless, she made efforts to overcome these harmful addictions. In 2014, Carly was a 31-year-old woman that lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia. She was a mother of 2 children, 7-year-old son William and 3-year-old daughter Cadence. Carly's children were from different men, but I couldn't find any specific information about her relationship with her former partners. However, we know that Andrew Easton, Cadence's father, was one of the last people to see Carly. In 2013, Carly checked into a rehabilitation center to overcome her addiction to illegal substances. While there, she met Sale Kenneth Newson, the friendship with whom gradually grew into something more. From August 2014, Carly and Sale started spending almost all their time together. The couple had fights sometimes, but they seemed to be happy on the surface. On September 30th, 2014, Sale took Carly to Musselbrook, where her 3-year-old daughter, Cadence, lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly came to stay with her for a few hours. She entered the house of her former partner at about 12:30 p.m. Sale didn't stay with her, but they agreed he would return in a few hours. However, when Sale came to pick up Carly, she was no longer there. Carly's ex-partner, Andrew Easton, said they fought, so Carly left. She planned to go to the nearest McDonald's, located about a 20-minute walk from Andrew Easton's house. Puzzled that Carly didn't call to tell him where she would be waiting for him, Sale started calling her himself. Since all attempts were unsuccessful, Sale drove towards McDonald's, where she allegedly planned to go. Along the way, he looked around, hoping to find Carly sitting somewhere waiting for him. He suggested her phone was dead, but Carly was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't at McDonald's, where she supposedly went, or anywhere near it. Sale drove around the streets of Musselbrook for a while, but it was in vain. Carly seemed to disappear into thin air. When she didn't return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him the details of what had happened. It would be exactly the same thing every time. I would drop her off, she would get out and go to the front door. She would have her daughter in her arms and turn around and wave me off, Newsom said. She would ring me twice and text me twice every visit to let me know she was okay. But on that day, I dropped her off about 12:30 p.m. and things were just different. And I didn't hear from her again. Not a thing. I texted her. I called her. But the phone just rang out. Newsom said he turned up at the house about 4:30 p.m. as usual to pick up Carly, only to be told by her ex that she had left after an argument earlier that afternoon and headed on foot towards a McDonald's restaurant about 1 mile away. Undoubtedly, the following question arose. Did Carly leave her ex-partner's house, or Andrew Easton was hiding something? His story suggested he was the last person to see her. However, no other witnesses could confirm that Carly really left his house. Police interviewed neighbors and people living along the route Carly would have taken if she had gone to McDonald's. The fact that no one saw her has further increased suspicions about her former partner. Unfortunately, no surveillance cameras near Andrew Easton's house could confirm or deny his words about Carly leaving around 2 p.m. After reviewing the recordings from the surveillance cameras at McDonald's, the investigators found no evidence she was ever there. Police searched fields behind a nearby residential area for clues. However, a chief investigator of this case said nothing particularly remarkable had been found, adding that the investigation would continue. They urged anyone with information about the disappearance of Carly McBride to contact the police department. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and she was carrying a tan handbag. After obtaining a search warrant, the police examined the house where Carly was seen last. A group of police officers went there, hoping to find clues that could shed some light on what happened to the mother of 2 children. But after searching Andrew Easton's house, the police did not find new clues. Nothing there indicated that someone committed a crime in that house. However, investigators did find something suspicious. They discovered Carly's Facebook account got deleted a few hours after she vanished before the official report of her disappearance. This mysterious deletion of her account on a social network raised a lot of questions. Are the account deletion and Carly's disappearance somehow connected? Was she the one to delete her account, or did someone else do it? Why was the account deleted? Perhaps the Facebook messages could tell about what happened, and that's why someone deleted the account. To get answers to these questions, the detectives turned to the U.S. Department of Justice, hoping the latter would help restore Carly's account and determine who could have deleted it. Facebook data analysis is done at the company's headquarters in Menlo Park, California. But Sergeant Wright said Ms. McBride's Facebook friends could help New South Wales police. We're asking if anyone may have been in contact with Carly via Facebook or any other social media in the days leading up to her disappearance. If anyone noticed anything unusual, if they could come forward and let us know, he said. Given the timing of the Facebook page being shut down and in the context of the disappearance, we think it's hugely suspicious, but it's also something that could hold some vital information about what happened to Carly. Carly's parents didn't believe their daughter had just fled to start a new life. Close friend and flatmate Carly Smith said nothing appeared out of the ordinary as she spoke with Carly on the phone as she traveled to Musselbrook. She was so down to earth. I would call her a free spirit. She was easygoing. She just loved life. Miss Smith said she was always there for her friends. If you were having a bad day, she just knew and she would be in contact. And she also made a plea. We all wake every day not knowing what happened, not knowing where she is, she said. You have to have a conscience. Come forward with some news. Just give us something. The police thoroughly searched the area where Carly was before her disappearance. The search included dogs, police divers examining the Hunter River and its surroundings, and aerial and trail bike patrols. And yet none of this helped to find any traces of Carly McBride. Months passed, but the investigation did not bring any results. Carly didn't leave any digital footprints. After she disappeared, she never turned on her phone. Her social media accounts were inactive, and she did not use bank cards. Investigators began to assume that Carly was no longer alive. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents sought help finding their daughter. They were joined by Detective Timothy Seymour, who could contribute by requesting any information helpful to the case. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, shed tears during the public appeal and begged for help to find her beloved daughter. "If you know anything, even if it's the smallest thing, please come forward and help us," she said. Steve and Lorraine said their family experienced difficulties after Carly's disappearance. "We are coping the best we can," Mr. McBride said. "As far as Carly's children are concerned, it's a fairly complex area. Both children have two different fathers. And to be honest, we haven't had too much close contact with those children. So we're just hoping that changes so we can have further contact with them." Detective Inspector Timothy Seymour said officers had worked tirelessly since Ms. McBride's disappearance. "We have a plethora of information that we are sorting through. However, we are still appealing again," Inspector Seymour said. "The breakthrough moment may come from somebody who might think they have an innocuous piece of information." Over time, Carly's parents started realizing that they would probably never see their daughter alive again. Lorraine wrote a heartbreaking letter addressing the man who robbed her of her daughter. "I don't believe there is one person who does not now know what happened to my bub or hasn't noticed what has happened on that fateful day. Please help us for her children. They are innocent and gorgeous babies. Whoever you are, you have taken their mummy away. Their lifeline to fun times and happiness in their lives. Their tower of strength. They will never feel her soft, warm and reassuring kisses and her big warm hugs with that big contagious belly laugh of hers and her radiant smile. Their memories are lost. They cannot say goodbye to her. Our pain, anguish, angst and frustration are keeping us all down, causing us to wake up super vigilant that we might get a call to say they have found my bub. Whoever you are, you decided on that day to rip my daughter away from us, you bottom-feeding runt. We are left with question after question after question. We don't know how to grieve or what we are grieving. We are in a kind of grief limbo. Our little beautiful poor babies need to know where their mommy is. They are the innocent victims in this horrible nightmare we are enduring. Please someone come forward so they can move on and grow into the amazing people their mummy would have wanted them to be. We can't honor and respect Carly's life until she is found. My daughter is reeling you in, and you will be a fine catch when you least expect it. This is my only wish, that we find my bub, that we can put her to rest. It is a basic human right with the dignity and respect that she deserves. Then her babies and their beautiful but broken hearts and heads can start to heal, and they may have a life without the anguish and pain and angst. You didn't give my daughter a chance. Please give her children the knowledge they ache for. William and Cadence should not be burdened with this pain. Please help us give them some semblance of grief and loss in their journey. Carly is a proud Aboriginal woman, as is her beautiful sister, and I am proud and honored to be their mother. No one deserves this in life, but my baby is reeling you in. You are breaking while we are aching. Your truth is Carly's truth, and in turn is our truth. Please someone speak up." Since the police couldn't link Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner Andrew Easton, they turned their attention to another potential suspect, Sale Newson. During the investigation, they learned that the relationship between Carly and Sale was far from perfect. The man was very jealous, which was a frequent cause of their fights. Despite their relatively short relationship, Newson told everyone he was deeply in love with Carly, mentioning she was the first woman he had fallen in love with in the last 14 years. He desperately asked for any information, participated in launching a Facebook page, offered financial rewards, and knocked on every door in the area where she was last seen. But notwithstanding these public statements of love and devotion, Newsom almost immediately started intimate relationships with other women. Besides, a few hours after reporting Carly missing, he offered sexual intercourse to several women. Carly disappeared on September 30th, and on October 2nd, spent the night with another woman. But in public, he behaved like an inconsolable guy who had lost the love of his life. Detectives also discovered that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before her disappearance. The reason for this fight was Facebook messages that Carly allegedly received from other men. However, all this was only circumstantial evidence. They needed direct links to bring any charges against Sale Newson. In April 2015, the authorities searched properties at 3 addresses, one in Muswellbrook and the other 2 in Scone. Scone is a town in the Upper Hunter Shire in the Hunter region of New South Wales, Australia. The distance from Scone to Muswell Brook is about 15 miles. During the searches, they seized 3 firearms and an unspecified amount of illegal substances and arrested a 24-year-old man, James Cannon. However, the police stressed that the charges weren't related to the ongoing investigation into Carly's disappearance. And yet, they did arise during this investigation. Thus, we should keep this name in mind. Almost 2 years have passed since Carly was last seen alive. The police continued to investigate, but there were no new clues to help solve the case. But then, suddenly, there was a breakthrough. On August 7, 2016, in a rural area near Scone, 2 local pedestrians found the remains in a shallow grave in a bush just a few feet from the road. Forensic examination confirmed that these were the remains of Carly McBride, a mother of 2 from Belmont, who went missing on September 30, 2014 in Muswellbrook. The police postponed the announcement of finding her body for 4 days, hoping to obtain additional evidence. Superintendent Guiana repeated police suspicions that they did not suspect Carly, 31, had been snatched off a street by a stranger. "We don't believe that this was a random act, so we are looking into her past and as many people as we can find," he said outside Scone Police Station. But he stopped short of identifying any suspects in the case, as it is all too fresh. "It has taken us 2 years to get this breakthrough, and we have a fairly vast volume of fresh evidence that we need to evaluate in a thorough fashion," he said. "We have put a lot of work into this in the past 2 years. The team here is pretty keen to solve this for Carly's family, and we have got so much new evidence now that it is going to take a lot of work. But we are well into it," he said. The heartbroken parents have told through tears of their desperate need for answers. "Please come forward with anything, Lorraine sobbed. "We still need to know who did this to my baby." The couple said they have had some closure now with her body being found and were extremely grateful for the police and public help to find their lost daughter. For 10 months, the investigators carried out extensive work, which resulted in the issued arrest warrant for Sale Newson. On June 19, 2017, he was arrested and taken to a police station. Newsom denied any involvement in the death of Carly McBride. However, Sale Newsom wasn't the only one who received charges. Police believed that 26-year-old James Cannon was the one who helped Newsom dispose of the body. Carly McBride, Sale Newsom, and James Cannon met in a rehabilitation center for people with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Each one left the center at different times and for various reasons, but they stayed in touch. The trial of Sale Newsom began in August 2018 and protracted for several years because the police had only circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors alleged that Newsom met with Carly after she left her ex-partner's house, struck her several blows to the head and back in a jealous rage, and threw her body away. Forensic experts have determined that Carly McBride died from multiple blunt force trauma. She suffered 23 fractures to her skull, 13 fractures to the torso, and spinal and rib fractures. The judge said Carly McBride suffered blunt force at the hands of Newsom before she died. Judge Erase also noted how Newsom had told interviewing police he was a skilled mixed martial arts fighter. His main sport was Thai boxing. "I had 20 fights and 20 wins. I trained alongside world champions. But when I got really good, I got too old," he told police. "I find the cause death was severe trauma to the brain due to a high degree of force to the deceased's head," the judge said. "I am satisfied the offender caused death by the use of fists or feet or both or the use of objects." While searching Newsom's house, police found the map in a shoebox under the bed. This map contained a drawn circle around the towns of Muswellbrook and Scone. Carly's remains were found exactly in this radius. That map also had the numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it in locations outside Muswellbrook, with Senior Constable Mohini giving evidence that the first 2 numbers marked the location of point-to-point cameras. After the police found Carly's remains in 2016, Newsom called her father, Steve. During the conversation, Newsom mentioned that the found skeleton was missing hand bones. And yet, the police never disclosed this information. The only people who knew about it were the police, Carly's parents, and the Department of Forensic Medicine at the John Hunter Hospital. As the authorities believed, Newsom knew about it because he was familiar with the crime scene, and he was the person who left Carly's body where they found it 2 years later. Moreover, The clothes on Carly's remains matched the ones she wore on the day of her disappearance. It suggested she died shortly after leaving her former partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newsom's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newsom took on the way to Musselbrook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newsom offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newsom injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. And while volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newsom was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. As well as that, Newsom claimed to know the area where Ms. McBride was found, like the back of my hand, and described it to Carly McBride's father, Steve McBride, despite only seeing footage of a fake crime scene set up by police. The images you are seeing now are not a real crime scene, but a staged one that the police used to see Newsom's reaction. The more investigators dug into Newsom, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls, the more he shone the light on himself. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutor said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared, and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge concluded that the motive for the brutal and unplanned attack on Carly was Newsom's jealousy. After he picked Carly up from Musselbrook, he discovered she had spent about 90 minutes with her ex-partner instead of spending time with her daughter as was planned. Carly's daughter was not at home during that time, and the fact that she was alone with her ex-partner for an hour and a half allegedly ended with Newsom attacking Carly in a jealous rage. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, told a sentencing hearing that she lived in a blur of grief and anxiety for 2 years as she waited for her happy, gorgeous, and outgoing daughter to come home to her 2 young children. Instead, the next time she saw Carly was in the morgue, a day she tearfully described as the worst day of my life. Carly should be here, living her life with her children, her sister, her father, and me, Ms. Williams said. After today, I never want to hear, speak, or see the man who took my beautiful daughter's life ever again. He no longer has any power to hurt me, and I refuse to think of him anymore. I will miss Carly for the rest of my life every second of every day, Ms. Williams said. Almost 7 years after he reported Carly missing, 43-year-old Newsom was found guilty. In December 2021, he was sentenced to 27 years in prison with parole eligibility in 2038. After the sentencing, Newsom turned to the judge to restate his innocence. I understand the verdict's been the verdict, he said. Your Honor, I'm innocent. From the day I reported Carly missing to this very day, I've been compliant with the police, with the courts, with the jails, everything, and I've been found guilty of a crime that I did not commit. Someone out there has committed this crime, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And now I've got a big struggle ahead of me to try and clear my name through the courts after this. James Cunning, who helped Newsom dispose of Carly McBride's body, denied his guilt. However, in July 2022, a jury found him guilty too. The judge said Cunning lied to police in 3 interrogations to create a false alibi for Newsom and deleted data from the phone to cover his tracks. Unfortunately, I couldn't find his picture, but it is known that when Cunning received charges in the Carly McBride case, he was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, the 31-year-old Cunning showed almost no reaction. When he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period. After the trial, Carly's parents said that although justice had prevailed and no matter the verdict, nothing would ever return their daughter. November 6, 1967, Dana and Benson Schaefer welcomed their daughter Rebecca Lucille into the world. An only child, Rebecca was adored by her parents. Her father Benson was a child psychologist and mother Dana was employed at Portland Community College. Growing up in Oregon in a religious Jewish family, Rebecca initially thought about becoming a rabbi, combining her faith and her love for other people. She loved the outdoor life, especially horse riding, and this is something her and her father bonded even more over. As she moved into her junior year, Rebecca started modeling and acting in amateur dramatic clubs. Her big smile and striking brown eyes shone through in her photo shoots, and her future career in front of the camera was starting to form. She appeared in adverts for department store catalogs as well as TV commercials. But she soon decided it was time for a change. She spoke to her parents about fulfilling a career as a full-time model, and they agreed. Aged just 16, she took a big leap. She moved across the country alone to the city of dreams, New York. With its bright lights, big atmosphere, and social buzz, New York was where many a hopeful performer would go in a bid to further their careers. Although her parents were understandably nervous, Rebecca said to her father, "Do you remember what you said to me, Dad? Sometimes you have to choose between adventure and regret." Although the city was big and overwhelming, 16-year-old Rebecca was more than a match for it. Within the first week of living there, she saw a strange man pacing in the subway with a sharpened screwdriver. A terrified young woman was sat in front of her, and Rebecca hurried over, pretending to know the girl, and said, "It's so great to see you. Let's go get a coffee," and pulled her up the stairs. As she settled into her new life in the Big Apple, she began attending the Professional Children's School. The elite Professional Children's School educates children who work in the entertainment industry and boasted stars such as Carrie Fisher and Christopher Walken as part of their prestigious alumni. It wasn't long before her perseverance and hard work paid off. In 1984, she got her first big break. She booked a 6-month recurring role in the ABC soap opera One Life to Live, playing Annie Barnes. After this, she landed a small role in Radio Days, the famous Woody Allen comedy. Sadly, her performance was edited from the film, and only a brief scene which features her remains. Despite her early success as a model, she soon found herself coming up against the tough expectations of the fashion industry. She stood at 5 feet 7 inches, and many agencies considered her to be too short to model for high fashion. She struggled to find further work, so she decided to leave New York. In 1985, she made another ambitious move, this time to Japan, to try and add more to her modeling portfolio, but once again, her height and weight were considered a problem. After this, she decided to return to New York and focus solely on her acting dreams. Undeterred, she started working as a waitress to support herself in between acting jobs, and carried on auditioning wherever and whenever she could. She was sharing an apartment with 5 other people, and just as her phone line got cut off, as she could no longer pay the bills, she booked a big role. She had recently shot for the popular 17 magazine, which caught the attention of TV producers. They were casting for the comedy My Sister Sam, starring Pam Dorber, who had become a household name thanks to the hit show Mork and Mindy. Rebecca auditioned and won the role of the feisty and funny Patty Russell, a teenager who makes the journey to live with her sister Sam after the death of their parents. Her life changed instantly, and she flew to Los Angeles to start filming the CBS show. Her parents couldn't be prouder of her move to Hollywood and were a little more relieved now she was living closer to them, as well as her grandfather who was living nearby in West Hollywood. The pilot of My Sister Sam aired in October 1986 and had a great time slot in between 2 already very popular shows. She and co-star Pam immediately hit it off, and Pam took 18-year-old Rebecca under her wing, eventually moving her into her house. Rebecca was bright and bubbly and immediately popular with audiences. She became the spokesperson for Thursday's Child, an organization that helps children and teenagers with various issues, including eating disorders, abuse, and suicide. Appearing on various chat shows, magazine covers, and even hosting the Thanksgiving parade for CBS, Pam Dawber could see Rebecca's life as a new and young celebrity was rapidly changing. Pam often gave her advice on how to navigate the celebrity world. Pam herself had issues with stalking and obsessive fans in the past and said she and the team told Rebecca, "You're on a hit show. We're going to go on this show for a while. You never put your real name on your mailbox." Rebecca, never put your real name on your mailbox. In 1987, while shooting My Sister Sam, the security at Warner Brothers Studios phoned Rebecca's team and asked if she knew a man that had come to meet her. 19-year-old Robert John Bardo had turned up to the set carrying roses and a huge teddy bear and claimed he knew the actress and wanted to see her. Rebecca confirmed she didn't know him and they did not allow him entry. Robert said he was frustrated as he couldn't understand why Rebecca would turn him away. A month later, Robert returned to Warner Brothers, this time extremely agitated and carrying a knife. Security were now aware of who he was and again stopped him from getting in. He was taken into the security office and was told he needed to stop as the obsession he had for the actress was going too far. The head of security was concerned and informed the production company about what had happened. Rebecca continued on with her life and various filming projects. Although My Sister Sam initially was a success with viewers, it was sadly canceled in 1988, halfway through the second season, leaving many episodes unaired. The show had changed its time slot and this impacted it massively. Rebecca was disappointed but continued to throw herself into auditioning. She was then cast in a string of roles including scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills, The End of Innocence and the television film Out of Time. July 18, 1989, 21-year-old Rebecca was now living in a West Hollywood apartment. As well as her career going from strength to strength, her personal life was in a great place too. She met 23-year-old TV and film director Brad Silberling on a blind date at UCLA Film School, and Brad said the chemistry was instant. Brad Silberling went on to direct many successful TV shows and films, including Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events and City of Angels, and the talented young duo had had talks of moving in together. On July 18th, Rebecca was prepping for a big audition for The Godfather Part 3, and was waiting for the script to be delivered to her door. When she heard the doorbell ring, she quickly answered. But it wasn't the script delivery she was hoping for. Stood in front of her was Robert John Bardo. It was the same man who had appeared twice at Warner Brothers Studios. He was clutching a letter and autograph she had once sent to him. Robert John Bardo was born in January 1970. The youngest of 7 children, he had a troubled childhood. After being abused by a sibling, was placed in foster care when he spoke about committing suicide and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. At the age of 15, he was briefly institutionalized to treat emotional problems and dropped out of school shortly after. Robert was only 19 years old and had developed a dangerous obsession with Rebecca Schaefer. Prior to his fixation with her, he was infatuated with a child peace activist, Samantha Smith, who was tragically killed in a plane crash in 1985. When she passed away, his attention turned to Rebecca. He started writing numerous letters to her after seeing her on a commercial for My Sister Sam. One of his letters she replied to, telling him it was one of the nicest letters she had ever got. What started as him being a fan of the character Patty quickly turned into a fixation with the actress Rebecca. He watched and taped every episode of My Sister Sam and bought every magazine he could find with her in. His room quickly became almost a shrine to the actress. He traveled by bus to Los Angeles in 1987, hoping to meet her on the set of My Sister Sam. But failing to get past security twice, he returned to Tucson and briefly lost interest with the actress. His obsession shifted towards artists, Debbie Gibson, Madonna, and Tiffany Darwish. In 1989, Robert watched Rebecca in the comedy scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills. In one scene, she appeared in bed with a male actor. Robert became so enraged and jealous by the scene, he decided that she needed to be punished for becoming, in his words, another Hollywood whore. The teenage Robert wrote a disturbing letter to his sister, saying if he couldn't have Rebecca, then he wouldn't allow anyone else to. Part of the letter read, "I have an obsession with the unattainable, and I have to eliminate something I cannot attain." After trying and failing to get Rebecca's address through her agent, Robert came across an article in People magazine which gave him a new idea. Arthur Richard Jackson had stalked and stabbed actress Teresa Saldana in 1982, and through the article in People magazine, Robert learned that Arthur had used a private investigator to obtain her address. Fortunately, Teresa Saldana survived the frightening attack and went on to found the Victims for Victims organization. She also participated in lobbying for the 1990 anti-stalking law and the 1994 Driver's Privacy Protection Act. Robert decided to use the same method as Arthur Jackson and paid a detective agency $250 to find Rebecca's address using DMV records. His brother helped him get hold of a gun after Robert himself was refused due to being too young and disclosing mental health problems on a form he had to fill out at the gun shop. For a third and final time, Robert traveled to Los Angeles and stayed in the neighborhood where Rebecca lived, showing people pictures of her and asking neighbors if she actually lived there. Once he was certain that her address was correct, on the morning of July 18th, he rang her doorbell just after 10 a.m. This encounter clearly unnerved Rebecca. She politely shook his hand and was pleasant to him, but asked him never to come to her home again. Robert was shocked and went to a nearby diner to have some food before returning to her apartment an hour later. He claimed he did this as he had forgotten to give her a cassette tape. According to Robert himself, she answered the door again, but had a cold look on her face. Robert said, "She had this kid voice, sounded like a little brat or something, said I was wasting her time. No matter what, I thought that was a very callous thing to say to a fan." Without warning, he pulled out a gun and shot her in the heart at point-blank range. According to Robert, she fell to the floor of her doorway, screaming, Why? Robert Bardo fled the scene, and shortly after, Rebecca's neighbor who had heard the shot and the blood-curdling scream rushed to the doorway. He felt no pulse and phoned 911. She was swiftly taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but there was nothing they could do. And tragically, 21-year-old Rebecca Schaefer was pronounced dead just 30 minutes after arriving. The following day in Tucson, several motorists phoned police to report a man running through traffic on Interstate 10. It was Robert Bardo. He told officers he was devastated by the death of Rebecca Schaefer and was acting out because of it. An incredibly suspicious thing to say, police faxed an image of Robert over to the LA detectives, who confirmed this was the man they were looking for. After hearing about the murder of Rebecca on the news, Robert's sister told police about the letter he had written to her. He was promptly arrested and extradited to California. He confessed immediately to what he had done. He was charged with first-degree murder, and prosecutor Marcia Clark would take on the trial 2 years later. Marcia became most well known for being part of the prosecution team on the O.J. Simpson trial in 1995, defending Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In Robert's case, she pushed hard for what is known as a bench trial. This means that the outcome would be decided by a judge rather than a jury. Robert Bardo agreed to this in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. Steve Galindo, a veteran public defender, was in charge of Robert's defense team. Judge Dino Fulgoni presided, and he was reported to be one of the top legal experts on psychiatric evidence in the state of California. Despite his confession, Robert still pled not guilty. His defense team argued he could not have premeditated the murder due to his mental health issues, something Marcia was keen to disprove. The defense team called psychiatrist Dr. Dietz to the stand, and he claimed that Robert may have schizophrenia and that is what may have led him to commit the crime. Marcia Clark hoped to prove that he did in fact plan the killing over several months. It was not a normal 13-year-old, nor with the notion that he was not a normal 19-year-old. A normal person doesn't stalk and murder a celebrity he's never met. Where is the evidence of delusion? That the defendant deluded himself into believing that maybe someday Rebecca might be his friend. Well then, haven't we all been guilty of being delusional at some point in our lives? Robert was carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye when he shot Rebecca, which he threw onto the roof of a building as he ran away. He insisted that it was purely coincidental, even though it emulated Mark David Chapman, who had also been carrying a copy with him when he shot and killed John Lennon. It came out that during the 18 months before he killed Rebecca, he had been arrested 3 times and charged with domestic violence and disorderly conduct. His neighbors also said that he had exhibited unwarranted threatening behavior towards them. Judge Fulgoni agreed with the prosecution. Marcia Clark's hard work paid off, and in October 1991, Robert John Bardo was found guilty of the murder of Rebecca Schaefer. On December 20th, 1991, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A year after the murder, Robert gave an interview in which he said, "I was a fan of hers and I may have carried it too far, but a lot of things have appeared in the press to make me out to be a monster. If I had one wish where, if it was ever to come true, it would be for Rebecca Schaefer to be alive today." Rebecca was buried in Portland, Oregon, and her service was attended by over 300 people. Her death influenced her boyfriend at the time, Brad Silberling, to write and direct the film Moonlight Mile, about a man's journey with grief after his fiancée is murdered. As a consequence of Robert obtaining Rebecca's address, as well as Arthur Jackson getting Teresa Saldana's details through the use of private detectives, the U.S. Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in 1994. This prohibits state departments of motor vehicles from disclosing the home address of state residents. The case also prompted the 1990 passage of America's first anti-stalking laws. In 2007, Robert Bardo was stabbed 11 times in the maximum security unit at Mule Creek State Prison in California. He was treated and survived, returning to jail soon after. As of 2020, he is serving his time at the Avenal State Prison in Avenal, California. He frequently draws artwork of famous people, including Rebecca Schaefer. 21-year-old Rebecca Schaefer was killed before her life had even properly started. She fought hard for her dreams and the career that she adored so much. The drive she had would have undoubtedly continued to push her forward. Immensely talented and ambitious, she had much more to achieve both personally and professionally. Her tragic and untimely death prompted some big and much-needed changes in the law, and her vibrant and kind-hearted spirit is kept alive by those that knew and loved her. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.